What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of What Would Chobra Do at 6:45 in the morning. We've been up all night reviewing some VODs, taking care of some other errands, and we want to make sure we get this out before the match begins for Gen.G, as they are in the decider match for their group. Unfortunately, not all the Pacific teams were able to actually get through the groups as the first place. Only DRX was able to get through, taking down Fnatic, and also last night, Talon Esports was eliminated. I don't think there's too much to say about that. Obviously, we'll review it, I think, once the entire tournament is over. But I think, the rocky side of them showed up. Same thing with their comps and the map drafts and things like that. So, I think they were simply outplayed. They weren't the better team today. They weren't a good team today, quite frankly, or last night. Now, the next match coming up for Pacific is actually going to be Gen.G going up against Sentinels in a rematch to see who is going to take that second slot in their group of Group B. And then afterwards, the next day, we actually have Ep6 going in against EDG. Not a rematch from this tournament, but of course, they've met each other very, very often at international stages. So that's going to be an interesting one as well. But I didn't have the time to really group all of that information together. So today, we're just going to talk briefly about Gen.G versus Sentinels. What are our prospects for that? What do we think is going to happen? Before we dive into things, not just because Sentinels won, but because Sentinels took, I think, the idea that everybody had, including probably the players on the team, which is why they made this decision, to go back to their older compositions, more standard and meta compositions that are better at, I guess, utilizing the basic fundamental theory of each map, right? Utilizing things like the Viper, that's going to make the flowchart a little bit simpler, not trying to play the Cypher lock. So we saw that in their match against Ep6. It worked out very well. I would say it's still not at the highest peak that we've seen Sentinels all year, but it brought back some of that magic that we saw from them before. It brought back some of the similar styles that we saw from them before, and a lot of it very similar to the style that Gen.G was trying to pursue all year long as well. So with that in mind, I do think Sentinels actually has a pretty strong chance. I'm gonna still favor Gen.G, not just because I'm biased, but just because I think they have more reps, right? And I think the map draft is still somewhat favorable to them and things like that. But I think this is a complete 180. I think you have to erase the opening match that Sentinels had against Gen.G, and now we just have to kind of take it in stride and say, okay, how do they look against Ep6? What do we think is going to happen coming into this match? So let's dive right in. Now let's take a look at some potential map drafts. Now, there's a couple of variables here, namely the Icebox and the Ascent. Those are kind of big question marks for me, but here's my thought process going through this. First of all, the Gen.G side of things, the Sunset ban, I don't think that's going to be too shocking at all. I think that's 100% a go-to. Gen.G, first of all, I think that's a priority ban for them right now. That's one of the ones they would like to, they don't prefer it. They still have some of the stronger map pools at this tournament for sure, but they don't prefer it. And at the same time, Sentinels, they used to enjoy playing the Sunset, so why leave that open? Why take the chance? So that's probably definitely getting banned right off the bat from Gen.G. However, when it comes to the Sentinels ban, I was very torn between the Ascent and the Haven. So there's a big question mark here. But basically, here's my thought process. Sentinels has spent the time to go back to the Viper over on the Lotus and over on the Bind in their games against Ep6. So they've retooled some of the maps where they wanted to change the composition and get away from the deadlock. Now, I'm going to assume that whenever we see this Ascent, whether it's later today in this match against Gen.G or not, that the deadlock's going to be gone from this map as well. However, you've already played against Gen.G on Haven. I don't think the composition itself was necessarily the problem. It was really the understanding of how Gen.G is using that Viper, which there is tape of, so I don't think they get too many excuses on that. But there were some very, very clear lessons to be taken from there, and I think you take those, and I think it's worth giving it another shot, right? And I don't think there's any reason that Gen.G would be changing how they play the Haven either. I think Sentinels is going to be more willing to just leave this open and say, hey, Gen.G, if you want to pick it, right? If it's still one of your go-to comforts, then go for it, and we'll have countered it, and just not worry about the Ascent. Because here's the other thing: even if Sentinels retools the Ascent is also one of Gen.G's best maps. So, to me, it just seems that given the limited time, Sentinels, if you're focusing on this and this, potentially, and then, leaving this open, floating that to get by against Ep6 and make sure you get that victory, then why tack on a lot more to work on when, the composition doesn't have to change. You just kind of learn the patterns, you learn the priorities here on Haven, and then you can kind of take more time with the Ascent. So that's why I think they're going to go with the Ascent ban. Originally, I actually had these swapped, because here's the thing: if the Ascent goes through, like Gen.G 100% picks it, and they don't care if you're going to play the Dunlock or not. I think they pick it no matter what over some of these other maps. So I think you go for that. Now, the Lotus pick, it can seem a little crazy. Obviously, that's another comfort zone for Gen.G as well. But you saw Heretics play Gen.G on it. You saw them take them apart on there as well. So I think that's worth a shot, just because Sentinels is going to be much more comfortable on the Lotus than they are on the Bind. I think we saw that even in their game against FPX. So I think Sentinels is kind of willing to go here and just face them head on. And then if that's the case, I mean, Haven, Bind, Icebox, Abyss. There is a world where Gen.G picks the Abyss, just blind, right? And say, hey, we're actually like so comfy on this. We know how to play this composition, the comp that they used to use on Breeze. So they could do that, but also it is like, it's elimination. It's do or die, right? So it's the qualifying match. It's the decider match going out of the group. So I think Gen.G will probably also go for, just, okay, let's go comfort for comfort, right? Now we're both basically playing an open book. Let's see who comes out on top, which would actually give us a double triple site match here, at which point then I think both teams are more willing to float the Abyss than kind of take the chances on stuff that they've kind of seen, but it's not exactly maps that either of them really prefer, both the Bind and the Icebox. Mostly I just put the Bind here for Gen.G just because I think Sen's going to be the one who bans the Icebox. So then between the Abyss and Bind, like Gen.G probably will just float the Abyss. I would be very surprised if Gen.G picked the Bind. I don't think the Icebox is getting picked by either team, but I would be very surprised if the Bind gets picked by Gen.G. Even though I am going to say Sentinels' Bind didn't look as thorough, but it looked like it was getting there. So let's talk about the maps that we did see from Sentinels, and why I think maybe you don't necessarily pick these and what changes we saw from them. So we'll talk about the Bind. I think we can keep that a little bit short here. Probably both of these it's going to be fairly short, because basically at the end of the day, we're seeing Sentinels return to their older form, return to their older concepts and their older patterns, which again share a lot of similarities to Gen.G's tendencies, which is why I think these two teams always match up in very exciting matches. But basically, something I did want to mention is on the attacking side of Bind against FPX, we actually saw Sentinels spend a lot of time focusing on playing through a short or a main, right? This was like a huge focal point for Sentinels on their attack, almost to the point where it just seemed really stubborn. Like they would just constantly try to drive it home through a main. Now, there were several times where they had some great advantages because maybe they would get to have something like the Thrash, right? And then they would be able to take oh no, that's not it. They'd send the Thrash in through here, through showers. Right. Meanwhile, the main crew is going through here, and you basically pinch. Maybe you're using the Brim ultimate, maybe you're using the Seize nade combo, whatever it is. But basically, you're routing people away from the Thrash because you assume that they're going to run away, especially when you're going around the corners. So that's going to push them away, and then you send utility somewhere either in front of the default plant or somewhere near triple to make sure that you're either trapping them or pushing them either further back to the site, which guarantees you not only advantages for the entire section of the front of the plant of the site right here, but it's also oftentimes going to net you a kill. Now, this is something that they focused on, and I really tried to spend some time thinking, like, why is that? Why are they not really prioritizing any showers control or like B main and showers control at the same time? A couple times in the half, but not too many. And I do think that this was mostly to straight up fight against FPX and their tendencies on the defense. FPX was playing the kind of interesting, very aggressive chamber composition. Autumn a lot of times playing around a main on the initial, trying to peek out, get a nice pick, get control of the site and the overall this side of the map through a main control or a short control, things like that. So I think this was mostly just hey, we know how to break through this with our ults, so let's just try to pressure it as many times as we can, and then we break through it on the rounds we do have ults, and then we get enough rounds on the first half. Because the other thing that's going to happen over on defense is that they are going to just play quite standard, where you're going to have people basically spread out apart and being able to rotate. Now, the reason I say that specifically for the attacking side, that they were looking to, I think, counter FPX's defensive setups, is because when it comes to the defense, it gets pretty straightforward. They play very standard defaults as you would with a composition similar to this, where you're kind of taking early showers control, maybe use the brim smoke to really, really secure that, get the nice early orb, and then either, the brimstone's rotating over, or maybe the Gecko, or sometimes the rays, but somebody rotates over once you've cleared that to make sure you can, like, re-clear this, and on B main, maybe you're going to have something like the Poison Cloud out here, or if the Brim goes over, it's another Brimstone Smoke, and then it's back and forth, back and forth. It gets pretty straightforward, and it's very good. I mean, it's very, very standard, but they're very proactive about that. They're very proactive about their rotations, and that makes the defense very healthy, because now you're going to have a lot of delay, especially against composition like FPX's, which was pretty limited in how they can kind of break through a site, unless they get, a bunch of first kills. So we can actually let a couple rounds play out here, but one of the things I want to mention is actually starting with round 4, Sentinels actually is able to basically chain together a bunch of ultimate rounds, like almost, I think, just straight up back to back, right? You just use this ultimate, Zekin's going to get a kill, he's going to really stalk towards the showstopper, you're going to get that next, and then you'll have, the orbital strike, and it gets very back to back to back, which is very good ult control. But the reason this happens is also because starting from their eco, Sentinels was just very, very concerned only about getting their ultimates. So I think this was a very intentional plan of, hey, let's just try to be, bullheaded on the attack, break through where we think, like, we know FPX is set up over on A main, and other than that, we are going to over on A short, and other than that, we are just going to focus on our ultimates and have great set plays that wrap around through showers, and then we'll get enough rounds on the attack. I think, there's not too much to read into that, because I feel like that was fairly targeted towards FPX. However, there is one thing to note there, is that Sentinels is very good at orb control and very good at ult economy control. So no matter which map you're playing on, that is something that you'll have to start to watch out for if you're playing against them in their current form, because that would mean, especially if you notice that they're prioritizing it, like starting with ecos right away, then like they're looking to just get enough rounds until they get to the second half. But here's the thing, I don't think Bind is going to be played. Gen.G could pick it, but they rarely ever pick into it. So, and seeing as how Sentinels looked prepared enough to take on FPX, I don't know if there's really any reason for you to pick that. So let's skip that for now. Let's focus on the map that we did see again from Sentinels, that I think we will probably see again, and then that we've seen so many times from both of these teams. It's going to be Lotus. This guy right here, and that jiggle, like, you want to make life interesting for him a little bit. You don't want Zellsis to get bored and fall asleep on this map, because all he's doing is jiggling C mound like nonstop almost every single round, because that's exactly what he does against FPX, and that they get so much information. I mean, you look at the clock here, it's down to the minute. He's been spending 40 seconds jiggling this, and he has no reason to stop. Partly, it doesn't really help that this toxic screen is clearly intended just for the entry, so you can basically abuse that against them. But like, you need to do something about this. You need to push him back. Ideally, you're destroying the Killjoy Util setup, but even if you're not going that far, you want to at least make sure Zellsis isn't able to just, even as the execute is happening, still jiggle this just in case. He finally moves at 40 seconds after the entire fight breaks up on A. Okay, like, that's something that Gen.G has to target, and I think they will, as they often do. Like, they don't leave C mound open just because they have plans for A. I think this is, again, kind of a result of FPX's composition, which they also changed up here coming into this match, which I know the casters mentioned it a little bit as well. I do wonder, but basically maybe trying to get too ahead of the curve, trying to throw too many curveballs in terms of compositional change. But whatever it is, obviously the composition, it doesn't really help them out here. They weren't very used to how they wanted to time their rotates, how they wanted to set up for it, guarantee other options. So I don't think Gen.G is going to make the same mistakes, but that is, like, if you let him do that, he's going to be doing that. Like, he's just constantly going to be here chilling out, saying, yo guys, I got full vision of the C side of the map and nobody's here. But before we switch out of this scene, you will recognize that just generally on the default, this is a very common default Killjoy setup, where you're going to have the turret over on B, and then you've got some stuff to delay, maybe trap them with the alarm bot, and even if, the entry is able to jump in, which they don't have here on FPX, which makes things even worse. But if it's a Razor Neon, like, maybe the entry duelist is able to still, like, sneak in here without much damage, but it cuts off the entire second line of entrance. So it's the standard setup. However, right away in the next round, what you're going to notice is it's a kind of it's a haphazard buy here from Ep6. But the real important part is this, is that you've got the tour de force coming up. Let me blow this up for you a little bit. You've got the tour de force coming up. So you've got a sniper rifle coming up for Autumn. He's been sharp with it this entire tournament. And so Zellsis chooses that he doesn't want to just die freely, nor does he want to get bored. So he's not going to jiggle. He puts a forward alarm bot, and he puts a trap killjoy turret as well to try to work off of if they come C. And now he's content to not push out. What does that mean? That means that we've got Zekken now pushing out in front of B to make sure that they still have some good information elsewhere. They've given up on A stairs, so you've still got John QT watching stairs, and then the other two guys are basically here to try to hold off and delay. These are two agents that have good delay tools. You've got the Odin as well. You know, it's a fade with a C's. It's an Omen with a Paranoia. It's all very good. And Zellsis, meanwhile, doesn't mind because of his setup if he spots things too late, because he's basically just going to work off of the alarm bot. Like, he's not even peeking. The dude who was jiggling for, what, a full minute in the round before is just like, hey, listen, we're just going to chill. Now, the Aftershock almost clears it, so he's going to pop his nanos. But basically, when you're going to have the tools to come in, or if you start pressuring him and you do that enough, and now let's say you've got big ults or you got an attacking op or something like that, just expect this change. Be a bit more aggressive, clear out that alarm bot, things like that. Be wary of the B main push out, because Sen is still going to want to have some clear information somewhere on the map. Very, very similar to Gen G. Now this round is just some heads up play coming in from Sentinels. So they have their own Viper's Pit, but there's 3 ults on the other side. You know, you have the From the Shadows, which, okay, maybe not that big, but you've got the Rolling Thunder, you've got the Viper's Pit as well. So immediately off the rip, Sentinels is going to put their own Viper's Pit on C, and they're going to put the forward alarm bot as well. So even if a Rolling Thunder comes in, the alarm bot's going to hold them off. They're going to get decayed. You still have a lot of room to work around within the site to try to catch them off guard, and that's great. That frees up the Killjoy Util to be watching mid, which is great because at the start of the round, Sentinels had the Raise Fade Omen combo over on a Rebel to make sure that they can pressure this. Now the one way's up here, the pit's up here, so you're all but guaranteed that this is going to show up over on B, unless there's a lot of investment. Now, again, this works even better because Ep6's composition is not great at breaking through these setups, but the cherry on top is that Zekken's about to get a collateral here. 1 for 2, buy one, get one free. It's an absolute sale, a bargain, and Zekken's going to be able to basically take down the spike and shut down the round for the most part here. But these are things that you'll want to watch out for with Sentinels, because once they're comfy, like, this is just some good understanding of the map, right? It's a very good understanding that even with a Rolling Thunder, we've got backup plans here with the Viper's Pit that shuts them down, and if they don't want to use, you know, their ults early, they're going to want to try to take contact. They don't have a duelist, so it's good understanding of the opponent's win condition as well. And after this timeout, as we jump into the game, Sentinels is going to show us that they're going to start with a very similar setup here. And it's going to be the Killjoy Util over on B once again. So it's a timeout. You've got a Nico. The ults are still there for Ep6. And so once again, Sentinels are going to switch things up just to make sure that they don't get caught off guard. You know, if they do come into C site, you're kind of willing to just say, hey, as long as we have 2 points of re-entry, we're willing to just kind of go for a retake there. We can still delay a lot with the snake bite and then follow up with a Killjoy double team. Gen.G does the same thing here on C site. So you just say, hey, let's get rid of the wild card. That's going to be the B site. And they change up their setup. But soon after, Zellsis is going to be happy to go back to his natural habitat over on C, and we're going to see him jiggle once again for who knows how long as the fight continues to happen over on a Rebel, because his sole job is to let the team know, are they rotating at all? So again, you got to disrupt Zellsis. I think that's a key part. But it just goes to show that once again, this is about the understanding of a map. It's very similar to how Gen.G plays. It's about, hey, if we're going to push out from this side, or if we are going to go for harder stack this side, let's make sure we have delayed tools like the Nanoswarm, any type of Sentinel or Viper utility, but let's make sure that we're peeking for information. Let's not just let it be a cue for us to understand that, hey, they're planting C, but let's make sure that that gives us early enough information on top of the delay that there's a calculation here that my teammates can rotate over. Now, as we take a look at the second half on the attacking side, on the pistol, Sentinels is going to go straight for a B hit right away. They're going to draw attention from Rubble, kind of keep them tied up there. They're not even going to care about Mound, and they are just going to go in hard. Paranoia as well. Nice blast pack. Zekin pushes through, takes control of it, and then they are going to go for the plant. Now, it's going to be planted default, but the biggest thing that I want us to keep a note of is going to be Zellsis' position. So Zellsis exits all the way, and he's actually going to hide. He doesn't want to challenge him. Why? Because he's got other plans. Now, it doesn't work out here, but I think it's always important to remember when you know a team is actually willing to go for post-plant lineups over here, especially on B side, because we don't see it as often. You just need to account for that, right? You just need to account for that in time. I mean, here it's a 2v1. You've already cleared it. It's a pistol, so you're feeling pretty comfy just going straight for the defuse. But other rounds, you're not going to have that luxury. So whether it's always having someone on the flank, you got to understand where the lineups are coming from, which is actually inside pillars, so you can't see it as clearly. And that's something that Gen.G will have to keep a note of if they are willing to just kind of let them get into B site. Now, that is the other thing to keep note of with Sentinel, is that here on Lotus, they are actually willing to use their utility to give them some extra reach once they are in the post plant. It's not necessarily about filling the site and taking early fights to prevent the flood, especially against Sentinels, because once again, Sentinels doesn't have a duelist, but they are willing to set things up like the Alarm Bot and the Nanoswarm, and things just to delay, as if they were waiting for reinforcements on defense. So, again, I think this is all very catered towards FPX, so I don't think you should rely on these too much as hard patterns, but it is worth noting that this is something that they relied on a lot, I would actually say on both maps, where they're willing to just say, hey, we're going to look to buy time. It's about time. We're going to play for time. We're going to play the game against you, all right? We're going to use the game against you, and it works out pretty successfully. So just a pattern to keep note of. So then what's another thing that Gen.G should be watching out for? Well, I think something that Heretics used very well against them is the tendency that Gen.G has to re-clear positions and actually commit to trades. So for instance, I mean, Rubble is kind of an easy go-to, but let's say that you're choosing to push out from the C side, right? But basically, let's say you contest for early mound control, but neither of you have gotten a confirmed kill. Neither of you have really gotten any confirmed positions. And it's not like you've been shoved away. Let's say you haven't, as Gen.G, you haven't shoved the opponents away from Rubble either, right? So this has not happened. So this has not actually happened, right? Maybe Sentinels has contested for this as well, so that hasn't happened. So then something that Gen.G is going to have to keep note of is the fact that Heretics abused the idea that they would eventually peek out here, right? And it would always be more than one. So Heretics is waiting here. They're ready for the double tap. One of the biggest things I think Heretics showed us was that as long as you're prepared, which is, again, something very similar that Gen.G used in their first couple of times playing against Paper Rex, is, hey, as long as we know that there's going to be more than one, or we know that they swing out together, we know that they swing out, from either side, we know that there's a flank, our position's going to be better, our crosshairs already trained, our reactions are going to be faster. And that's something that Heretics always use. They realize that Gen.G is not one to be content with just say, hey, we got a tag on the Prowler, it chased somebody, that's fine. No, Gen.G will want to re-clear whether it's here or on the other side of the map. So no matter where it is you have to watch out for the enemies that are going to be waiting and watching for the peek out. How can Gen.G change that? I mean, obviously without changing the entire philosophy of your overall game. Now, the first couple times, you could kind of change how you set up delay. Maybe you could decide that you're going to be more willing to use the paranoia early, so you don't waste too much util here. And you're just gonna rotate these guys backwards. Now that you've cleared it, maybe you can jiggle peek a little bit more aggressively over by C mound, and as you're going back, if the omen does get pressed, then maybe they just go ahead and use that paranoia a lot earlier, because afterwards you're gonna have backup. That's one way to do things. Another way to do things would be to simply say, hey, we're not going to peek in the same time that we usually do, right? We're not going to re-clear right away. We're not going to peek right away. If we got the tag, we wait. Maybe we wait for other util. Maybe we force them to take contact and we're actually covering for each other from mound and from around the corner. It's to basically draw them into your own traps where they now have to actually confirm that information. So I think a couple of rounds, I mean, I think it's actually okay because this is a different team and because Sentinels will have been focusing a lot on their own fundamentals to now try to adjust to what you're doing. I think it's okay to start with your own patterns and your own styles for gen.g, but as soon as you realize that they're doing the same thing, they're waiting for you, they know how to trade for you, they know where the swings come out from, they know the timings when you swing off of your util. As soon as you experience that one round, you just put all, you press on all the brakes and you say, okay, this is where we take risks, and we say we give up on our over rotates, right? We've obsessed about it all year long. It's helped us greatly, but teams have figured it out. So now we have to get ahead of them in a different way. Now we force them to get information against us. And again, this is going to depend from composition to composition. But for instance, on Lotus, you're playing the same thing. So you should know exactly what the win conditions are for your enemy. And as simple as that sounds, I think that's what it's going to come down to. Now, I know it makes it, I've diluted it a lot, but I really do think this match is going to come down to a lot of mid-rounding and round-to-round calling, because both teams, I think, are going to be coming in focusing on maps and compositions that they're already comfortable with. It's about how do we get the better read on each other. Now, you're going to have to be well-prepped in tendencies. I think that's where Heretics came out one step ahead, because it was much easier for them to make these round-to-round reads because they felt that they were one step ahead. And at certain points, Boo, you could tell he had so much confidence that he was actually willing to get aggressive with his calls and throw curveballs left and right against gen.g and basically controlling the pace. At a certain point, Heretics was pressuring gen.g enough that gen.g was starting to feel that they had to take more contact. They're like, oh, we gotta confirm this even more. We gotta go fight for this even more because we don't want Heretics to set up. And I think this was also gen.g maybe respecting Heretics too much and saying, hey, these guys are pretty good, so we can't just sit and assume that they're going to respect our setups. We have to keep going out and taking fights to dwindle their numbers and make sure that they don't get set up, which is fair because Heretics is pretty scary once they are set up. But Sentinels also can get pretty scary if they're set up, but I don't think you should be too scared of that because gen.g started to play very uncharacteristically aggressive. Now, I know that there was talk about the smoke machine, things like that. It does seem like, by the way, I was at the venue after, the day after, I believe, for the Korean analyst desk, and it seems like they either lessened it or completely turned it off. So it seems like player feedback was pretty well taken on that front. But the round-to-round calling, I think the biggest thing you want to remember for Sentinels is on the defense, it's still very, very flowcharty, right? It's get information one side, set up, Zekin or Tens or whoever it is, or Zellsis, and then rotate to the other side. Over on Lotus, a lot of it's going to rely on Zellsis just jiggle peeking. Over on the bind, it's about setting up that showers control. And then when it comes to the attack, I think you just have to watch out for, are they just gunning for the ult orbs and making sure they get an X amount of rounds? Are they just gunning for the minimum? And what do we need to do about that? Ult orb economy is going to be huge against Sentinels because, again, if you're not feeling that you're as diverse, the ults and how you chain them is where you can really shake things up. So I think that's another thing to note here against Sentinels as well. Outside of that, I went back and watched the Madrid finals as well because it's like, okay, if you guys are both going back to just the basics that when did you both feel pretty confident about that? All the way back to Masters Madrid. And honestly, Masters Madrid, they actually play very similarly, right? Both of them are trying to take fights early in the post plants on their attack to prevent, very fast flood retakes, to make sure that there's not a full setup of a set retake, things like that. So very similar. It again just comes down to round-to-round reads, and whoever is able to get one step ahead there, it's going to be a positive cycle for you. So I would love to see gen.g not get too antsy, work off of the basics that we've just seen from Sentinels. Just make sure you have an immediate backup. Don't get stubborn. Just as soon as you feel that they've countered you in that one round, that's when you switch gears. And then you go to plan B that you've already prepared. So I think that's something that gen.g will have to do. Curious to see, do we see the bind or not? That's my big question. Or the Abyss, I guess. And then for Sentinels, is it Ascent or Haven that you're a little bit more afraid of? Personally, if I was Sentinels, I would ban the Ascent, but obviously I don't know what they've done in their scrims. So, if they've spent just as much time taking out the deadlock from the Ascent comp, I could see them leaving that open, even if it's a comfort map for gen.g. We'll just have to wait and see. It is insane to think that one of these teams gets eliminated, right? Only one of them can make it through because there's only one slot left. So We'll have to see what it is, but with DRX being the only team up in the playoffs so far, for Pacific fans, I dearly hope that Gen G's back in form. I still favor them, but I am going to say I think Sentinels deserves a respect again because they've gotten back to a comfort zone where they can adapt well enough inside the server. That's going to be it for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you are liking the videos, please consider leaving a like and a comment down below. And of course, subscribe to the channel to know whenever the next videos come up, which should be the very next day because Paper X is playing in 24 hours after the Gen G match as well. So we're going to keep grinding away. And of course, we will be watch partying at least the Pacific matches. So you can drop by here on YouTube or on Twitch to join us for those live co-streams. That's going to be it for me. We'll be back in the next day for the Paper X matchup against EDG, and hopefully we will be celebrating Gen G's win at that point. I'll see you then.